Victor Hale believed dawn was his safest hour. That was when mistakes were supposed to fade, when secrets stayed locked behind hotel doors, when the world still slept. At 5:42 a.m., he stepped out of a black sedan, adjusted his tailored coat, and looked up at the glass-front mansion he owned in Manhattan. The city air was cold, sharp, unforgiving. His phone buzzed once in his pocket. He ignored it. Nothing mattered now, except getting inside quietly, showering away the night, and slipping back into the life he controlled so well. Inside, the house was dark. Not the soft, sleepy dark he expected. This darkness was hollow, the kind that presses against your ears. No lights left on, no familiar glow from the kitchen, no faint sound of movement upstairs. Victor frowned. Clare always left one lamp on. He closed the door behind him and stood still, listening. His shoes echoed too loudly on the marble floor. The silence answered back. He called her name once, casually, already annoyed. No response. He walked into the living room. The couch cushions were perfectly arranged. The framed wedding photo on the side table was gone. So was the throw blanket Clare used every night, the one she said made the baby kick. Victor's chest tightened. He moved faster now. Upstairs, the bedroom felt wrong. Her closet door stood open, shelves bare, drawers empty, the jewelry case missing. Even the prenatal vitamins were gone from the nightstand. This wasn't an argument. This wasn't a dramatic outburst. This was deliberate. His phone buzzed again. This time, he answered. "Mr. Hale?" a calm voice said. "Professional, official. This is the Manhattan Police Department. We need to ask you a few questions regarding your wife." Victor sat down on the edge of the bed, the room suddenly spinning. "What about her?" he asked. There was a pause on the line, just long enough to let fear settle. "We received a report early this morning," the officer continued, "that Clare Hale may be missing, and there are circumstances we need to clarify." Victor stared at the empty space where Clare had slept for years, his mind racing backward through the night he thought meant nothing. And then the officer added one sentence that made his blood run cold. "Sir, your wife disappeared hours before you came home." End quote. Victor ended the call without remembering how. His hand stayed frozen around the phone, as if it were no longer an object, but a verdict. The word missing echoed in his head, hollow and sharp at the same time. Clare didn't disappear. She wasn't that kind of woman. She planned grocery lists days ahead. She folded laundry by color. She never left anything unfinished. He stood up too fast, his knee hitting the bedframe. The pain barely registered. He paced the bedroom, opening drawers that were already empty, checking corners that made no sense. The bathroom was spotless. Her toothbrush was gone. The pregnancy journal she wrote in every night was missing. Even the small framed ultrasound photo had vanished. Victor told himself this was a tactic. Clare was emotional, pregnant, sensitive. She was trying to scare him, that was all. He pulled out his phone and called her number. It rang once, straight to voicemail. Again, voicemail. He sent a text, then another, irritation creeping into his chest like heat. "Where are you? This isn't funny. Call me now." No response. Downstairs, the kitchen felt staged. The counter was wiped clean, no half-made tea, no breakfast prep. The fridge held only bottled water and condiments. Clare used to plan meals a week in advance, taping lists neatly to the fridge door. The list was gone. So was the magnet holding it. Victor opened the trash. Empty. A tight pressure formed behind his eyes. This wasn't impulsive. It was surgical. His phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't the police. It was Lily. "Did you get home?" Her message read. He stared at the screen, anger flaring. Of course she was awake. Of course she was checking in. He didn't reply. Right now, she was a complication he couldn't afford. Victor walked into his office and opened his laptop, fingers moving fast, controlled. He checked joint accounts. No withdrawals. He checked credit cards. No activity. Relief flickered, brief and shallow. Clare hadn't taken money. That meant something else was happening, something worse. The doorbell rang. Victor froze. At this hour, no one rang the doorbell. He approached the door slowly, his pulse loud in his ears. Through the glass, he saw two silhouettes. Dark uniforms, calm posture, official. He opened the door. "Mr. Hale," the officer said evenly, "we need to follow up in person. There are details about your wife's condition you weren't informed of." Victor swallowed. What condition? The officer met his eyes, unreadable. Sir, your wife was admitted to a hospital last night, and she left against medical advice. The officers left after 20 minutes, taking notes Victor couldn't read and offering no comfort he didn't want. The front door closed, and the house swallowed the sound. Silence rushed back in, thicker than before. Victor stood alone in the foyer, staring at his own reflection in the dark glass, a man who still believed control would return if he just stood still long enough. He didn't. He moved through the house again, slower this time, noticing details he had ignored before. The hallway cabinet where Clare kept documents was unlocked. Inside, the folders were gone, not shuffled, not messy. Gone. Marriage certificate, insurance papers, medical records, even the emergency contacts list she had insisted on updating after the pregnancy. Empty shelves stared back at him like accusations. Victor felt something new crawl up his spine. Not anger, not fear. Respect. This had taken time. In the guest room, the bed was untouched, but the nightstand drawer was open. The burner phone Victor didn't know existed was missing. So was the envelope of cash he kept hidden behind old tax files. Clare had never gone near that drawer before. Or so he thought. He entered the nursery last. The room was still half finished. Soft gray walls, a white crib waiting to be assembled. The rocking chair by the window sat perfectly still, but the box on the floor was gone. The one containing the baby clothes Victor's mother had sent. Expensive. Unnecessary. Clare had smiled politely and said thank you. Later, she had folded them anyway. Now they were gone. Victor pressed a hand against the crib rail, his breath uneven. You can't do this, he muttered to the empty room, unsure who he was speaking to. You don't know how this works. But the truth settled uncomfortably in his chest. Clare did know how this worked. She had known for a long time. He went back to his office and logged into his secure files. Everything looked normal at first glance. Accounts balanced, access intact. He exhaled slowly. This was the real world, not emotions, not drama. Numbers didn't lie. Then he noticed the timestamp. Someone had accessed a file at 3:11 a.m. His stomach dropped. The file wasn't money. It was information. A private memo outlining asset restructuring, written years ago, when Clare still sat beside him during late nights, listening quietly while he talked through deals. He had assumed she didn't understand. He had been wrong. Victor's phone vibrated. A message appeared from an unknown number. One thing you should know, the text read. I didn't leave in fear. Ask B. Then another message followed, slower, deliberate. I left because I finally had leverage. By mid-morning, the house no longer felt like Victor's. It felt like evidence. Every clean surface, every empty space whispered intention. He showered, dressed, and tried to anchor himself in routine, but his hands shook as he fastened his watch. Control, the thing he relied on most, was slipping in ways he couldn't quantify. His phone rang again. This time, it was his attorney. Victor, the man said without greeting, I just received a notice. It didn't come through you, which is unusual. Victor closed his eyes. What notice? There's been a legal filing, the attorney continued carefully. Not a divorce petition, not yet, but a protective motion concerning medical autonomy and custodial intent. Victor's jaw tightened. That's impossible. Clare wouldn't know how to. She didn't file it alone, the attorney interrupted. Someone experienced drafted this. Very experienced. Victor felt heat rise up his neck. Can you shut it down? There was a pause. Too long. No, the attorney said. Not immediately. The motion references medical negligence risk, emotional abandonment, and a documented pattern of absence. Victor laughed, sharp and hollow. Documented by who? Hospital staff, the attorney replied. Security logs, timestamps. Apparently, your wife arrived alone last night. She asked for you. You weren't reachable. If you osses tapas it. The words landed heavier than any accusation. Victor pictured the hotel room, the muted lights, the glass of water on the nightstand, the phone he'd silenced. She left the hospital, Victor said coldly. Against advice. Yes, the attorney agreed. And that's what makes this complicated. The filing argues she left because she felt unsafe staying. Unsafe? Victor snapped. From me? From the environment, the attorney corrected. Including emotional stress, public image matters here, and some scars. After the call ended, Victor sat at his desk, staring at nothing. His phone buzzed again. Lily's name lit up the screen. He hesitated, then answered. "Victor," she said softly. "I just saw something online. It's small, but people are asking questions. About your wife." "What kind of questions?" he asked. "About why she was admitted. About why she left. About why you weren't there." Victor ended the call without responding. He opened his laptop and searched his own name. Nothing yet. But he knew how this worked. Whispers came before storms. A final message appeared on his phone. From the same unknown number. "You taught me once," it read. "That timing decides who wins." Then, one last line followed. "The clock started last night. And you were busy." By afternoon, Victor realized the worst part wasn't that Clare was gone. It was that other people were starting to notice. His assistant stood in the doorway of his office, pale and tense, holding an iPad like it weighed too much. "I didn't want to interrupt," she said carefully, "but there's movement." Victor looked up slowly. "Movement where?" "Social channels, private forums, industry group chats." She swallowed. Nothing explicit, just questions. She handed him the screen. A single post had been shared dozens of times already. "Anyone else hear about Victor Hale's pregnant wife being admitted to the hospital alone last night?" Victor's jaw tightened. That could be anyone. Another comment loaded beneath it. "Security logs don't lie," she asked for him. He wasn't there. Victor pushed the iPad away. "Shut it down." "We can't," she said quietly. "It's not an article. It's not defamatory. It's concern." Concern. The word burned. He dismissed her and sat back, staring at the ceiling. For years, he had mastered narrative. Deals, scandals, rivals, everything could be reframed, delayed, buried. But this wasn't a business opponent. This was a pregnant woman who had vanished after a hospital visit. Sympathy didn't need proof. It multiplied on its own. His phone rang again. His mother. "Victor," she said, skipping pleasantries, "why am I hearing from my bridge group that your wife is missing?" "She's not missing," he snapped. "She's being dramatic." "And what?" "And 2010. There was silence on the line. Then, colder, "She's carrying your child." He hung up. Minutes later, a notification appeared from his bank. Not an alert, a notice. "Temporary review in progress." Victor's heart stuttered. He logged in immediately. The account wasn't frozen, but access was limited. Transfers delayed. Oversight applied. "This is impossible," he muttered. Then his lawyer called back. "Victor," he said, voice tight, "I need you to listen carefully. A guardian ad litem has been informally contacted." Victor stood up so fast his chair fell backward. "For an unborn child?" "Yes," the lawyer said. Someone argued imminent risk. Victor's mouth went dry. "By who?" "I don't know," the lawyer admitted. "But whoever it is, they're moving quietly, strategically." Victor ended the call and stood alone in the office, breathing hard. For the first time, the possibility entered his mind, not that Clare had left him, not that she wanted revenge, but that she was protecting herself from him. His phone buzzed one last time that day. A message from the unknown number. "You always said exposure was weakness." A pause. Then the final line appeared. "Now you know how it feels to be seen." Lily Grant watched the city from her apartment window. Manhattan stretched out beneath her like a glittering lie. She hadn't slept. The silk dress from the night before lay crumpled on a chair, useless now, stripped of its power. For the first time since she met Victor Hale, the thrill was gone. Her phone buzzed. "Victor." She stared at the name, feeling something unfamiliar tighten in her chest. Not excitement, not pride. Unease. She let it ring. Then again. On the third call, she answered. "Why aren't you responding?" Victor demanded, skipping hello. His voice was sharp, controlled, but Lily could hear the crack underneath. "I've been busy," she replied evenly. "Doing what?" "Thinking," Lily said. "Something you should try." There was a pause. Victor exhaled. "You've seen the noise. This is temporary. Clare is unstable. She's using the pregnancy to manipulate the situation." Lily closed her eyes. "That's not what it looks like," she said quietly. Victor scoffed. "You don't know her." "I do know Bao. I know hospitals don't admit women at night for drama," Lily shot back. "And I know security logs don't lie." Silence. Victor lowered his voice. Listen to me. This will pass. I need you to stay calm. Stay close. There it was. Not care, not concern. Utility. Lily felt the final piece click into place. I can't do that, she said. What? Victor snapped. I said I can't, she repeated. I won't be part of this. You're overreacting, he said coldly. You knew what this was. End quote. I thought I did, Lily replied. I thought I was choosing power. Turns out, I was just convenient. She hung up before he could respond. Lily walked to her desk and opened her laptop. Files she had ignored for weeks stared back at her. Guest lists, private schedules, discreet bookings, patterns she hadn't wanted to see. She remembered something Victor once said over wine, smiling like it was a joke. Everyone's replaceable if you time it right. At the time, she had laughed. Now, she understood. Her phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. I know you're not stupid, it read. And I know you don't like being disposable. Lily's breath caught. Another message followed. You don't owe me loyalty. You owe yourself clarity. She stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she typed back, slow and deliberate. What do you want? The reply came almost instantly. Nothing, the message said. Just the truth. When you're ready, if you want nation. Lily looked back at the city, at the lights that promised everything and protected nothing. For the first time, she stepped away from Victor Hale. And without realizing it, she stepped directly into the storm he never saw coming. Victor had always trusted contracts more than people. People lied. Paper didn't. That belief steadied him as he sat in his office late that night, the city outside his windows glowing with indifference. He poured himself a drink he didn't want and opened the secure folder labeled Prenuptial Agreement. The document had been drafted years ago. Aggressive, airtight, designed to protect him from exactly this kind of chaos. Clare would walk away with nothing. That was the plan. He scrolled slowly, his confidence returning with every clause. Separate property, no spousal support, confidentiality, arbitration, control. He had insisted on every line. Clare had signed without protest, smiling softly, saying she trusted him. Victor smirked at the memory. Then he reached a section he didn't remember. Clause 17b. His brow furrowed as he read it again. And then again? In the event of pregnancy, medical vulnerability, or demonstrable abandonment by a spouse, the non-breaching party retains the right to initiate protective restructuring of shared assets, including temporary access limitations, pending judicial review. End quote. Victor's fingers tightened on the mouse. That's not standard, he muttered. He checked the metadata. The clause had been added during a revision meeting he barely remembered, years ago, when Clare was still working late nights beside him, quietly reviewing documents while he took calls. He had assumed she was just keeping busy. Victor grabbed his phone and called his attorney. Why is Clause 17b in my prenup? He demanded the moment the call connected. The attorney hesitated. You approved it. No, I didn't. Yes, you did, the attorney replied carefully. You signed off after Clare requested an amendment. She argued it was necessary for future family protection. Victor laughed sharply. And you let that through? You insisted she feel secure, the attorney said. You said happy spouses didn't sue. The words tasted bitter now. Victor slammed his fist on the desk. Can it be challenged? Eventually, the attorney said. But right now, it's active. Especially given the hospital records. Victor hung up and stared at the screen, his reflection warped in the glass. For the first time, he saw it clearly. Clare hadn't been passive. She had been patient. His phone buzzed with a new message. Unknown number. You always believed preparation was paranoia, the message read. I believed it was survival. Another line followed. You signed that clause yourself. I just made sure you understood it too late. End quote. Victor leaned back in his chair, the room suddenly too small, the air too thin. Outside, the city moved on. Inside, the foundation he had built his life on began to crack, not from attack, but from a mistake he had made years ago, when he thought love meant control. The man who walked into the quiet conference room at dawn didn't look like a savior. He looked tired. Nathan Cole loosened his tie, set his leather briefcase on the table, and glanced once at the clock. 6:18 a.m. Too early for court. Too late for coincidence. "Thank you for coming," Claire said from across the room. Her voice was steady, but Nathan noticed the way her hand rested protectively over her stomach, the way her shoulders held tension she refused to show. He took a seat without asking questions. That alone told her she had chosen the right person. "You said it was urgent," he replied. "And that you were finally ready." Claire nodded. "I didn't want to drag you into this unless I had no other option." Nathan gave a small, humorless smile. "You never called unless things were already burning." She almost smiled at that. 10 years earlier, Clare had been a junior strategist, unnoticed, underestimated. Nathan had been on the verge of professional ruin, framed quietly, pushed out politely. She had stayed late, connected numbers no one else bothered to read, and handed him the proof that saved his career. He never forgot that. "Victor thinks this is emotional," Claire said calmly. "He thinks I left because I was scared." Nathan leaned forward. "You didn't." "No," she said. "I left because I was prepared." She slid a folder across the table. Nathan opened it slowly. Hospital records, time-stamped absences, prenup clauses, financial memos, security logs, everything arranged with ruthless clarity. Nathan exhaled under his breath. "This isn't defense," he said. "This is positioning." And Claire met his eyes. "I don't want revenge. I want safety. For my child. And I want the truth to stand on its own." Nathan closed the folder. "Then we move quietly. No press. No dramatic filings. We let him think he still has room. And when he realizes he doesn't?" Claire asked. Nathan stood. "By then, it won't matter." For the first time in days, Claire felt something loosen in her chest. Not relief. Something deeper. Trust. As Nathan reached the door, he paused. "One more thing," he said. "Victor will assume someone manipulated you." Claire shook her head. "Let him." Nathan nodded once. "Good. Because the most dangerous thing for a man like him is realizing too late that the woman he underestimated was always capable of ending the game." When he left, Claire sat alone, breathing evenly. Outside, the city woke up, and for the first time, she wasn't running from it. Victor felt it before anyone told him. The pressure, the delay, the subtle resistance he had built his empire to avoid. At 9:07 a.m., he attempted a routine transfer between two internal holding accounts. It was a habit, a daily sweep that kept liquidity, fluid, and power unquestioned. The screen loaded longer than usual. Then a neutral message appeared. "Transaction pending review." Victor stared at it, unmoving. He refreshed. Same message. "That's not possible," he said aloud to the empty office. He called his private banker immediately. No answer. He tried again, straight to voicemail. The third call connected, but the voice on the other end sounded different. Formal. Cautious. "There's been a temporary oversight flag," the banker said. "Nothing alarming, just procedure." "What triggered it?" Victor asked. A pause. "A protective filing tied to medical vulnerability." Victor closed his eyes. "Of course it was. This affects my operations," he said sharply. "You don't freeze movement without cause." End quote. "It's not a freeze," the banker corrected. "It's a delay. For now. For now." The phrase hit harder than any accusation. Victor hung up and opened his internal dashboard. Most assets were intact, but not all access was equal anymore. Windows had narrowed, doors had slowed. He scrolled through recent activity logs. Someone had been busy, not withdrawing, not stealing, positioning, restructuring, visibility, moving authority just enough to make every action require permission. Claire hadn't taken money. She had taken momentum. Victor leaned back, breathing through his nose, forcing his thoughts into order. This was still manageable. Oversight could be challenged. Reviews could be expedited. He still had relationships. Influence. His phone buzzed. A message from Lily. "We need to talk," it read. He didn't respond. Instead, he opened a private forum he rarely visited anymore. The conversations were still polite, still professional, but something had shifted. Replies came slower. Assumptions were being questioned. A new message appeared from an unknown number. "You're feeling it now," the text said. The friction. Victor's jaw tightened. Another line followed. "You built everything to move fast. I built this to make you wait." Victor stood and walked to the window, staring down at the city that had once bent so easily to his will. He had underestimated patience. He had underestimated silence. And for the first time, he understood the danger wasn't exposure. It was containment. His phone vibrated again. One final message appeared, calm and precise. This was just the first door. Victor agreed to meet Lily because he believed he still controlled the variables. She had been an indulgence, a distraction, never a threat. Whatever noise she was hearing, whatever doubts she claimed to have, he assumed he could contain her the way he contained everything else. They met in a private lounge overlooking the river, quiet enough to feel expensive. Lily arrived first, calm, composed. That alone unsettled him. "You look tired," she said as he sat down. "I've had a week," Victor replied coolly. "Let's not pretend you don't know why." Lily didn't argue. She stirred her coffee slowly, then looked up. "I know more than you think." Victor smiled thinly. "Careful. Curiosity isn't the same as leverage." She met his gaze without blinking. "Neither is arrogance." That wiped the smile from his face. "You always spoke about loyalty," Lily continued. "About how people stayed because you rewarded them. But that's not loyalty, that's dependency." Victor leaned forward. "And what exactly are you suggesting?" "That I've seen the pattern," she said. "The hotels, the promises, the way women are rotated, not chosen." Victor scoffed. "You knew what this was." "I knew what you wanted me to believe it was," Lily replied. "I didn't know how disposable everyone was, including me." She reached into her bag and placed her phone on the table, screen facing him. A paused video, a document folder, time-stamped messages. Victor's stomach tightened. "What is this?" he asked. "Insurance," Lily said softly. "For myself and for someone else." His voice dropped. "You went behind my back?" "I went ahead of you," she corrected. "You taught me timing matters." Victor stood abruptly. "You're making a mistake?" "Of regress." Lily didn't move. "No, I'm correcting one." She stood, smoothing her coat. "By the way, Victor, she wasn't wrong." "Who?" he snapped. "Clare," Lily said. "She didn't leave because she was afraid. She left because she finally saw you clearly." Victor felt something fracture in his chest, sharp and sudden. "You gave her information," he accused. Lily smiled sadly. "I gave her truth. The rest she already had." She walked away without looking back. Victor sat alone, the weight of the moment sinking in too late. His phone buzzed. A final message from the unknown number appeared. "You lost an ally today, and you didn't even see it happen." Clare woke to the steady rhythm of monitors and the soft hum of filtered air. The room was quiet, clean, intentionally anonymous. No flowers. No cards. No visitors wandering in by accident. That had been the condition. Safety first, always. She shifted carefully, one hand resting over her stomach. The baby moved, strong and impatient, a reminder that fear had a deadline. The doctor had been clear the night she left the hospital. Stress like hers was dangerous, not dramatic, dangerous. A nurse entered, calm and kind. "Your vitals look good," she said. "Dr. Henson will be in shortly." Claire nodded. She didn't ask where she was. She already knew. A private medical facility, upstate, discreet, well-funded, the kind executives used when they couldn't afford attention. Victor had brought clients like this here before. He had never imagined she would use the same doors to disappear from him. Her phone buzzed softly. "Nathan." "First door closed," the message read. He felt it. Claire exhaled slowly. "Good." She hadn't wanted to know details at first. Only outcomes. Nathan insisted that distance was part of clarity. If she watched Victor struggle in real time, it would pull her back into the emotional gravity she had escaped. This wasn't about watching him fall. It was about standing long enough to protect what mattered. Another message appeared. "Media's circling," Nathan wrote. "No direct hits yet. But the narrative is shifting." Claire stared at the ceiling, thinking of the woman she had been months ago. Quiet, careful. Afraid that asking for too much would cost her everything. Afraid that being alone would be worse than being diminished. She had been wrong. Being unseen was worse. Dr. Henson entered, reviewing her chart. "You did the right thing," he said gently. "Leaving when you did may have prevented serious complications." Claire swallowed. "And my baby?" "Strong," he said with a reassuring smile. "Very strong." Tears burned her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. "Not yet." Later, alone again, Claire opened her phone and scrolled through photos she hadn't deleted. Not memories of Victor. Evidence of herself. Late nights working beside him, notes she had taken. Ideas she had given away because she believed partnership meant sacrifice. She typed one message and saved it, not sent. For years, I stayed quiet so you could feel powerful. She locked the screen. Outside, Victor was losing ground. Inside, Claire was gaining something she hadn't felt in a long time. Stability. And when her phone buzzed again, one final message waited. Phase 2 begins tomorrow. The first article didn't mention Victor's name in the headline. That was intentional. It appeared mid-morning on a respected financial blog, written in neutral language, framed as concern rather than accusation. Sources confirm a high-profile executive's pregnant spouse left a Manhattan hospital alone after reported emotional distress. Victor read it twice, then a third time, his jaw tightening with every word. No speculation, no drama, just facts, carefully selected. Hospital admission, absence of spouse, ongoing medical vulnerability. No rebuttal opportunity. By noon, the article had been shared quietly across industry circles. Not viral, not loud, but persistent. The kind of story people read closely and discuss privately. The kind that stains reputations without ever needing proof of guilt. Victor's communications director stood across from him, pale. "We can issue a statement," she said. "But if we deny too hard, it looks defensive. And if we say nothing?" Victor snapped. "It looks like confirmation," she replied softly. Victor rubbed his temples. This wasn't how scandals worked. There was supposed to be outrage first, denial second, distraction third. Instead, this was calm, thoughtful, dangerous. His phone buzzed. Another alert. A second outlet had picked it up, then a third. All using the same phrasing. Someone was guiding this. Victor called his attorney. Straight to voicemail. He checked his email. 3 meeting cancellations, polite excuses, scheduling conflicts. "We'll circle back." Bought of his faces. He knew what that meant. Across town, Lily sat alone at a cafe, watching the news unfold on her phone. She felt no triumph, only relief. The truth, once released, didn't need her anymore. It moved on its own. Back in his office, Victor stared at his reflection in the dark screen of his laptop. He looked the same, suit tailored, hair perfect, posture confident, but something essential had shifted. This wasn't an attack on his business. It was an exposure of his character. And character was harder to defend. By evening, Victor's mother called again. This time, her voice was tight with restraint. "I've been asked questions at the club," she said. "Questions I shouldn't have to answer." Victor closed his eyes. "What questions?" he asked. "About why your wife felt unsafe," she replied. "About what kind of man leaves a pregnant woman alone in a hospital." The call ended without resolution. That night, Victor stood in the empty house, lights off, watching the city flicker beyond the windows. He realized then that Clare didn't need to speak. The world was doing it for her. And somewhere, far from the noise, she was resting, protected, while he remained exactly where he was, surrounded by power, wealth, and silence that no longer obeyed him. His phone buzzed one last time that day. A message from the unknown number. "This is what happens when the truth goes public before you're ready." Victor finally did what he should have done years ago. He went back and looked. Not at headlines, not at comments, at numbers. He locked himself in his office after midnight, sleeves rolled up, tie discarded, staring at archived files he had never bothered to reopen. Early deal structures, old pitch decks, strategy memos labeled with dates from before the first condo, before the press, before the arrogance hardened into habit, before Clare became invisible. He scrolled slowly, a sinking weight forming in his chest. Patterns emerged. Decisions he remembered making instinctively now carried annotations he didn't recognize. Risk mitigations, contingency paths, quiet warnings embedded between projections. They were written in Clare's voice. Short, precise, unemotional. Victor leaned back, breath shallow. He remembered those nights now. How she would sit nearby, pretending to read, occasionally asking a question that sharpened a deal instead of softening it. He had thought she was learning from him. She had been correcting him. He opened a folder he had never opened before. Clare, archive. He didn't remember creating it. Inside were saved drafts of presentations that later made him millions. The final versions bore his name alone. But the earlier logic, the frameworks, the defensive clauses that protected him during downturns, they were hers. Victor's hands trembled slightly. She had never asked for credit, never negotiated recognition, never demanded ownership. She had simply stayed quiet and watched him take the applause. His phone buzzed, an internal message from a board member. "We need to talk about narrative control," it read. "People are connecting dots." Victor didn't reply. Across town, Lily sat in her apartment, staring at her own screen. She had been watching the same connections form, the same buried truths rise to the surface. She felt something unexpected, then not guilt, but clarity. Clare had never competed. She had outgrown him without ever announcing it. Victor closed his laptop slowly. The room felt smaller now, like it was shrinking around him. He finally understood the cruel irony of it all. Clare hadn't taken revenge. She hadn't taken money. She hadn't taken public credit for what she built. She had taken distance. And distance was the one thing he couldn't dominate. His phone lit up one more time. A message from Nathan, brief and surgical. "You're not losing what you own," it read. "You're losing what you never earned alone." Victor stared at the words, the truth settling deeper than any headline ever could. And in that moment, he realized the most dangerous part of Clare Monroe's plan wasn't what she was doing now. It was what she had already done years ago. And she had never once warned him. The courthouse steps were crowded, but Victor felt strangely unseen as he stepped out of the car. Cameras were there, though kept at a respectful distance. No shouting, no accusations. Just lenses waiting, observing, recording. He adjusted his jacket, straightened his spine, and reminded himself that rooms like this were where he usually won. Inside, the air was cool and impersonal. Marble floors, muted voices. The quiet authority of a place designed to strip emotion from conflict. Victor signed in, nodded to faces he recognized, and ignored the ones that no longer smiled. His attorney met him near the elevator, expression carefully neutral. "She hasn't arrived yet," he said. Victor nodded. Of course she hasn't. He told himself Clare was still hiding, recuperating, delaying. It was easier to believe that than to imagine her choosing when to appear. They entered the hearing room. Victor took his seat at the polished table, hands folded, jaw tight. The judge hadn't arrived. The opposing chair sat empty. Minutes passed. Victor's confidence began to feel brittle. His attorney leaned closer. "We should be prepared," he whispered. "Her filings are thorough." Victor scoffed softly. "She's emotional. Judges see through that." The door opened. Conversations hushed. Victor looked up, expecting lawyers, aides, procedural noise. Instead, he saw Clare. She moved slowly, carefully, accompanied by Nathan Cole and a court officer. She wore no makeup, no jewelry. A simple, tailored dress that didn't hide her pregnancy or apologize for it. Her face was calm, not defiant, not afraid, present. Victor's breath caught. This wasn't the woman he remembered leaving behind. She didn't look broken. She didn't look angry. She looked resolved. Clare took her seat without glancing his way. Nathan placed a folder on the table, thick and organized. The judge entered moments later, and the room rose as one. As proceedings began, Victor listened in disbelief. Medical documentation, timeline analysis, abandonment patterns, prenuptial clauses activated by specific conditions. Each point delivered without drama, without exaggeration. This wasn't a plea. It was a case. Victor's attorney objected twice. The judge overruled both times. Then Nathan stood. "Your Honor," he said calmly, "my client is not here to punish her spouse. She is here to protect herself and her unborn child." Clare finally looked at Victor then, not with hatred, with finality. Victor felt something sink deep in his chest, heavy and irreversible. The room no longer belonged to him. The narrative wasn't his to steer. And as the judge adjusted her glasses and turned to the next document, Victor understood something too late. This wasn't the beginning of the trial. It was the end of his advantage. The judge paused, fingers resting on the file as the room settled into a tense quiet. Clare felt every breath, every shift of weight, every heartbeat echo in her ears. Nathan had done exactly what he promised. He built the structure, framed the facts, removed emotion from the equation. Now there was only one thing left. Her voice? "Mrs. Hale," the judge said evenly, "you may speak if you wish." Victor turned toward her at last, searching her face for something familiar. Fear. Hesitation. The need to explain herself to him. He found none of it. Clare stood slowly, one hand supporting her lower back, the other resting over her stomach. The movement was careful but deliberate, a reminder of what was at stake and what she had carried alone for far too long. "I'm not here to accuse," Clare began, her voice calm but steady. "And I'm not here to ask for sympathy." Victor swallowed. "For years, I believed that being quiet was the same as being loyal," she continued. "I believed that supporting my husband meant erasing myself. I thought love required endurance, even when it became harmful." She looked at the judge, not at Victor. "The night I went to the hospital, I wasn't dramatic. I wasn't confused. I was scared, and I was alone. Not because my husband was unreachable, but because he chose not to be." A subtle stir moved through the room. "I left because I understood something very clearly," Clare said. "If I stayed silent any longer, my child would inherit the same absence I learned to survive." Victor's jaw tightened. He wanted to interrupt. He couldn't. "I didn't plan revenge," she said. "I planned protection. For my body, for my child, for my future." Her eyes finally met Victor's. "And I planned it because I knew no one would do it for me." The judge listened without expression, pen moving slowly across the page. Clare took a breath. "I'm not asking to be rescued. I'm asking for the space to live without fear. That's all." She sat down. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy, earned. Victor felt something irreversible settle into place. This wasn't about contracts anymore, or image, or control. This was about a woman who had stopped explaining herself. The judge closed the file gently. "Thank you, Mrs. Hale," she said. And in that moment, Victor understood the truth he had avoided for years. Clare hadn't taken power from him. She had simply taken it back. The judge returned after a brief recess, expression composed, unreadable. The courtroom rose and sat again, the scrape of chairs sounding louder than it should have. Victor felt every second stretch. He had walked into rooms like this his entire life, believing patience was a weapon he alone mastered. Today, patience worked against him. Having reviewed the filings, the judge began. "This court recognizes the activation of Clause 17B of the prenuptial agreement." Victor stiffened. The judge continued, voice steady. "The clause clearly states that in the event of pregnancy combined with medical vulnerability and demonstrable abandonment, the non-breaching party may initiate protective restructuring." Victor's attorney leaned forward, whispering urgently. "We object." "Overruled," the judge said calmly. "The documentation supports the claim." Nathan remained still, hands folded. Clare focused on her breathing. "The court therefore orders the following," the judge said. "Temporary financial authority shall remain restricted, pending full review. Primary medical decision-making authority is granted to Mrs. Hale. All unilateral asset movement by Mr. Hale is suspended." The words landed one by one, precise and devastating. Victor's mouth went dry. "This is excessive," his attorney protested. "My client has not been proven negligent." The judge looked directly at Victor. "Negligence is not the threshold here. Risk is." Victor felt heat rise in his face. Risk. He had built an empire on managing risk, and yet he had failed to see the most obvious one standing beside him for years. The judge turned another page. "Additionally, given the circumstances, this court recommends the appointment of an independent guardian ad litem to represent the unborn child's interests." End quote. That was the blow. Victor gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. This was no longer a warning, it was containment. Clare felt the weight of it too, but differently. Not as loss, as release. The judge concluded, "These measures are effective immediately." The gavel came down softly. It was over. Victor stood slowly, the room seeming farther away than before. Conversations resumed around him, hushed but alive. He looked at Clare once more, searching for triumph, for satisfaction. He found none. She looked tired, focused, free. As she rose to leave with Nathan, Victor spoke, his voice low. "You planned this?" Clare paused, then turned. "I planned to survive," she said. The rest happened because you gave me no reason to stay quiet." She walked away without waiting for his reply. Victor stood alone as the courtroom emptied, the truth finally settling in. He hadn't lost because she attacked him. He lost because the system he trusted worked exactly as written, and he had signed every word. Outside the courtroom, cameras waited, and this time, there would be no statement that could save him. Victor didn't speak to the cameras outside the courthouse. For the first time in his career, he walked past them, without a statement, without a smile, without a strategy. The flashbulbs followed him anyway, capturing the smallest details. He could no longer control the tension in his jaw, the stiffness in his walk, the absence of anyone at his side. By evening, the consequences began to arrive quietly. The board meeting scheduled for the next morning was postponed. No explanation. Just a brief email marked pending review. 2 hours later, a major partner requested a pause on all joint initiatives, citing reputational alignment. Victor read the phrase twice, disbelief hardening into something colder. Alignment. He returned to the house just before midnight. The lights were still off. He didn't turn them on. He sat in the dark living room, the silence now familiar, almost mocking. For years, this space had been his refuge, a place where success insulated him from consequence. Now it felt like a museum of choices that no longer belonged to him. His phone buzzed. A message from his banker. "We need to revisit exposure levels. Several institutions are reassessing risk." Victor closed his eyes. Another notification followed. Then another. A speaking engagement quietly canceled. A charity board accepting his temporary resignation. A publication he once fed exclusives to publishing a measured editorial about leadership and accountability. Nothing accused him directly. Everything distanced itself. Victor poured a drink and didn't taste it. He opened his laptop and watched his name slowly disappear from places it once dominated. Influence didn't collapse in one dramatic moment. It eroded, grain by grain, as people decided he was no longer worth defending. Across town, Clare sat in a quiet room, listening to rain tap against the window. Nathan updated her briefly, professionally. She didn't ask for details. She already knew how this ended. Victor's phone rang again. His mother. "I can't protect you from this," she said softly. "Not anymore." He didn't argue. After the call ended, Victor stared at his reflection in the dark screen. For the first time, he saw what everyone else had begun to see, a man who had mistaken control for strength, silence for loyalty, and love for ownership. His final message of the night arrived from an unknown number, the same one that had followed him for weeks. "You thought collapse would be loud," it read. "But this is how power really leaves." End quote. End quote. Victor set the phone down and let the silence take over. Outside, the city moved on, and for the first time, it did so without him. The investigation did not arrive with sirens or handcuffs. It arrived with emails, letters, and polite requests for clarification. Victor received the first notice 3 days after the hearing, a regulatory inquiry into offshore restructuring practices, routine language, cooperative tone, but the attachment list was long and the deadline was short. Someone wanted answers, while the ground was still soft beneath his feet. By the end of the week, there were more. A tax authority flagged inconsistencies he had always assumed were invisible. A compliance firm requested interviews with senior staff who now avoided his calls. His assistant resigned quietly, leaving a single line in her message. "I need distance." Distance. The word followed him everywhere. Victor sat alone in his office, walls stripped bare where framed awards once hung. Boxes were stacked neatly by the door. Not his decision. The firm had suggested he work remotely until matters resolved. He knew what that meant. Temporary solutions had a way of becoming permanent when confidence evaporated. His phone buzzed with a message from Lily. The first since she walked away. "I hope you understand now," it read. "This wasn't personal. It was inevitable." Victor didn't reply. Across town, Clare watched snow fall softly outside her window. The baby kicked, strong and steady. She smiled faintly, one hand resting on her stomach, the other holding a warm mug she hadn't rushed to finish. For the first time in years, her body wasn't braced for impact. Nathan called briefly. "The guardian appointment is finalized," he said, and the review board confirmed compliance violations. Nothing criminal yet, but the penalties will be significant. Clare closed her eyes. Not in relief, in closure. Back in the city, Victor attended a dinner he once would have dominated. This time, he was seated near the edge. Conversations stopped when he approached. Smiles didn't reach eyes. People excused themselves early. No one confronted him. They didn't have to. The final blow came quietly, late on a Friday evening. An official notice of removal from the foundation he had founded, citing reputational risk and fiduciary duty. His name would remain on past documents, not on the future. Victor set the paper down and stared at the wall. For years, he believed punishment came with noise, with outrage, with spectacle. He had been wrong. Real consequences arrived calmly, professionally, and without appeal. His phone buzzed once more. The unknown number. Balance restored, the message read. Not by revenge, by consequence. Victor didn't delete it. He finally understood. This wasn't about losing Clare. It was about losing the version of himself the world no longer needed. Clare held her son just after dawn, the room quiet except for his breathing and the soft rustle of sheets. The delivery had been long, careful, monitored by people who spoke gently and never rushed her fear. When they placed him in her arms, something inside her finally loosened. Not the pain, the vigilance. This was what safety felt like. Nathan stood a respectful distance away, smiling without intruding. He had handled calls, paperwork, signatures. He had shielded her from noise and timelines. Now he said nothing at all, and that mattered more than words. He's strong, the nurse said softly, just like his mother. Clare smiled, tears finally allowed to fall. In the weeks that followed, life reorganized itself around clarity. A small home near the water replaced the mansion that had never felt like hers. Mornings began with light instead of dread. Meals were eaten without checking phones. Her body healed, her mind followed. The court finalized custody without contest. The guardian's report was brief and firm. Stability favored the mother. Care favored the mother. Presence favored the mother. Clare signed the last document with a steady hand and felt nothing break inside her. Money came later, not as a victory, but as restitution. Accounts unlocked in her name. A consulting offer arrived from a firm that remembered her work before she disappeared into marriage. She declined the first offer, accepted the second, on her terms, remote, flexible, clean. Across the city, Victor moved through a smaller life, apartments instead of houses, meetings instead of rooms. He complied. He adapted. He was quieter now. People spoke of him in the past tense, as a case study, not a warning. Clare didn't follow the updates. One afternoon, Nathan stopped by with groceries and stayed for dinner. They talked about ordinary things. Weather, work, the baby's stubborn schedule. When he left, he hesitated at the door. "You don't need me anymore," he said carefully. Clare considered that, then shook her head. "I don't need saving," she said. "That's different." He smiled, relieved. They took their time after that. No declarations, no urgency. Trust grew the way it was meant to, slowly, with evidence, with rest. Months later, standing barefoot on the sand with her son asleep against her shoulder, Clare realized what she had been given wasn't revenge or wealth or validation. It was choice. The choice to love without fear. The choice to build without erasing herself. The choice to be seen and still be safe. And that was more than she had ever asked for. 1 year later, the morning light filled the small coastal house without asking permission. Clare woke before her son, listening to the quiet rhythm of waves beyond the windows. There was no rush in her body anymore, no instinct to brace. Peace had settled into her like muscle memory. She brewed coffee, simple and strong, and stepped onto the porch barefoot. The world felt wider here, honest. Nothing glittered and nothing hid. She liked it that way. Inside, her son stirred. She lifted him easily, kissed his hair, and felt the solid certainty of a life anchored in presence. This was the reward no court document could list. This was the ending she had earned. Later that afternoon, a small gathering formed on the sand. Nothing elaborate, just a few people who had stayed. Nathan arrived last, sleeves rolled up, shoes in hand, smiling in that quiet way that never demanded attention. He knelt to greet her son first. That had always mattered to her. They hadn't rushed anything. Love, she learned, didn't need momentum to feel real. It needed consistency. Respect. Safety. As the sun dipped low, Nathan reached for her hand. No speech, no audience. Just a question asked with his eyes, answered with her nod. Months later, they married quietly. No press, no announcements, no proving anything to anyone. Clare wore a simple dress and stood grounded, not waiting to be chosen, but choosing. The life ahead of her felt expansive, not fragile. Across the city, Victor watched the news of an acquisition he once would have led. Someone else's name filled the screen. He turned it off. His world was smaller now, quieter. Consequences had settled where excuses used to live. He carried them alone. Clare never checked. She was busy living. On a clear morning, standing in the kitchen with her son laughing at her feet and Nathan reading beside the window, Clare understood the full shape of justice. It wasn't humiliation. It wasn't spectacle. It was balance. She had lost a marriage that required her to disappear. She had gained a life that allowed her to exist fully. The past no longer chased her. The future no longer scared her. And in that stillness, Clare Monroe knew the truth that closed everything cleanly and completely. She hadn't survived the story. She had outgrown it. So that's where the story closes. And if you're still here with us right now, all the way to this moment, then something in this story touched you. Maybe quietly, maybe painfully, maybe in a way you didn't expect. Stories like this don't stay with us because of the drama alone. They stay because they mirror real life. The moments when we stay silent too long, when we confuse endurance with love, when we give pieces of ourselves away hoping things will change. One of the core lessons here is simple but powerful. Self-respect is not selfish. As the Stoics believed, you cannot control how others act, but you can control what you tolerate. Healing doesn't begin when others apologize. It begins when you decide you deserve peace. Strength isn't loud revenge. It's quiet boundaries. It's choosing clarity over chaos. It's understanding, as Marcus Aurelius once taught, that your life is shaped by your thoughts, and changing your thoughts changes your future. Clare didn't win because she destroyed someone else. She won because she stopped abandoning herself. And that's something we can all apply. Choose dignity over fear, patience over impulse, and inner stability over external approval. If this story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue telling stories that heal, reflect, and remind us that growth is possible no matter where you start. Thank you for being here.